Hey, what is up, mortals? It is TCCrew here, and before we get into today's video, there's a few things I would like to say. Firstly, a thank you to everyone who worked on this project from the beginning to end. And secondly, we would like to announce WTC Naruto Minecraft server, which will be acting as the sponsor of today's video. On the WTC Naruto server, you can play as a ninja and build your own village. There are many different clans for you to choose from, so it would be awesome if you joined us over there. Now, lastly, this is a completed video. So, if you're interested in seeing more of this sort of video, then make sure to leave a comment in the comment section and leave a like. It really does help. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's get into the video. What if Overhaul was a hero? The complete series.
Can you speak? What's your name? There was a pause. He was an older man, possibly around 50 or so, and dressed to the nines. He was the classic Yakuza, dressed in a matching pair of dress pants and a button-up ivory dress shirt. His graying hair slicked back and his keen-edged mahogany eyes enough to shave steel. The young boy, no more than 5 feet in height, stared at the man in silence. The slightest glimmer of fear appeared in his golden hues. Tears brimming just beyond the horizon. Chisaki, Kai Chisaki. Got no place to call home, kid? The older man asked, looking down at the boy with narrowed chocolate hues. The dark-haired youth vigorously shook his head from left to right. The boy was homeless, abandoned, and left to whatever fate awaited him by careless parents who couldn't care less about the golden-eyed boy. Well, Kai, why don't you come with me? I can give you a nice home and hot food, the old man said, offering the young boy a hand. Kai stared at it in silence for a moment before extending his own hand to seize it. The tumultuous bark of his alarm tore the young teen from his sleep. Golden hues flickered before opening. He had long since grown accustomed to the barren white walls that make up the Shie Hasakai headquarters that he called home for the past several years. Sitting up, the thin white cotton sheets fell from the young man's thin slip-like form, revealing muscle that was no longer mere flesh and bone, as it was when Kai was first introduced into the Yakuza, but true and toned strength. Kai! The ivory clock-haired youth yelled, peering in and around the corner of the doorway that made up the entrance to Kai's bedroom. The boss wants to see you. He says he has something he'd like you to deal with, the youth said. What does the boss want today? A little early, isn't it, Chrono? Kai addressed his childhood friend, pulling on his usual black button-up while doing so. Hari shrugged his shoulders, turning away from the door and giving Kai ample room to vacate the room and turning out into the hallway. His pale-haired friend was at his side as the two of them walked side by side to the boss's office, which was, in reality, a barren blank walled room with little more than a single desk, a glass table, and a sofa within its walls. Opening the door, the smoky-haired old man would look up from where he sat at his desk. Hard eyes hardened further from the age quickly befalling the two 15-year-olds. In unison, the both of them bowed. Stand up, both of you. Today's the day the two of you will move up in the Hasakai and become men, the boss said. As if to emphasize his point, a trio of men came shoving in through the doors at Kai's back. And in between the two men at the sides was a rough-looking blonde belligerent dressed in a two-piece white suit that had become a staple look for the Yakuza. He had bright blue eyes and a chin full of scratchy-looking facial hair. Shoving off either man at his side, he stomped forwards, slamming down both of his hands atop of the elder man's desk with ferocity of a bulldozer. What the hell was that about, old man? Did you really have to send these two assholes? Couldn't have you just called me? The gangster barked. The boss looked at his subordinate with tired eyes. Hanabit tells me you've been embezzling money from us. he said in a monotone voice. You know that us here in the Shie Sakai are forgiving of most things. But stealing from us? From your family? How do you expect us to forgive that? The boss averted his gaze from the man standing before him and to the two teens standing near the back. Kai and Hari straightened up almost immediately. Kai, would you come here, please? The man asked, looking to the blond man once again. Stepping forward, to the sound of the man's beckoning call, Kai would come to a sudden halt about a foot away from the man's desk. He and the thug the boss had been addressing locking eyes for a moment before the boss would speak again. Kai, you know what we do with thieves. I need you to punish him. The elderly man would say, earning a look from the blond man at Kai's side. Kai! The boss would suddenly yell. The change in tone causes the young brunette to jump slightly. Yes, sir! The young Chisaki would say. Turning, he would extend a hand to the blonde, whose faster than average reflexes would shove him aside. Turning, his flesh, muscle, and bone would warp and merge in a sickening display of viscera, before a fleshy, whip-like appendage would be used to backhand the boss into the opposing wall with a loud crash of stone and wood. He would then turn, shooting the fleshy appendage into Kai's chest, throwing him across the room into the wall with a frightening display of speed and power. Don't touch me, you damn brat! His opposing hand shaped into that of a claw, the very same claw that he would encroach upon the boss with. So that's how it's gonna be, huh? I dedicated my life to you, only for you to use your damn kid and try to take mine? The Sakai's done! Not even you could stop what's about to happen. The wood... Raising the claw overhead, moments before bringing it down, the man would grunt as a silverish arrow pierced his side. The odd spear-like tool almost appeared to be a hand of a claw. Ugh! He grunted, the pain spreading through his side and into his nervous system. Suddenly finding his movement slowed to a near complete stop. He could only watch in abject horror as the bruised form of Kai Chisaki rose up from the wreckage of the bookshelf he had gotten thrown into. Looking from his hands and to the man, he took off sprinting forward before slamming the man with both hands. The moment all five of both sets of fingers touched the man, his face would seize up in pain. Partially drawn, veiny lines began creeping along his flesh from where the boy had touched him. Along these veins, his flesh would suddenly pucker, before bulging towards like a poorly made water balloon. Then, the man would suddenly mystify and splatter not only the boss, but Kai and Hari as well, in a brilliant display, bright red viscera. The feeling of the man's hot sanguine made Kai's skin crawl, and he viciously scratched his arm, where a series of pockmarked angry red bumps had begun appearing on his flesh. Yes, Kai, yes! The boss celebrated, rising up from the bloodied wreckage. His body was adorned with minor bruises and scratches. He placed both hands of either of the young Chisaki's shoulder, the touch going unnoticed by the otherwise catatonic Kai as he stared at his bloodied hands. However, the scene slowed to a pause at the sound of knocking at the office door. Who is it? The boss commanded, annoyance in his voice. But to his chagrin, no response was given. In a brilliant blast, what was once a door was suddenly reduced to splinters. A man with short, bright pink hair led the charge. A sudden blinding flash of light from his forearms blinded not only Kai, but the boss as well, allowing for the heroes to quickly enter the room, subduing and bringing both Kai and Hari to the ground. All the while, a hero that Kai had only ever seen on TV stood in all of his golden brilliance before them, standing over the still form of their boss. It was All Might. The black-haired Naomasa Tsukauchi stood at his side, covering his mouth and nose with a handkerchief at the sight of what was once a man. Damn it. I knew we should have taken more precautions with this operation. What do you think did this to him? The ebony-haired man asked, averting his gaze from the boss and the golden-eyed, blood-splattered young boy who lay pinned to the ground. Kai! The boss yelled, struggling beneath the grip of the officer on top of him. Use your quirk, Kai! Kill them! Kill all of them! Pinned, stained red and terrified, Kai could only stare at the boss as he yelled. The officer on top of the young Chisaki moved fast, securing the young boy's hands before suddenly reeling. His flesh pulsed beneath the plating he wore, and, like the man before him, he exploded into a violent spray of crimson. What the? The police chief, Naomasa, began. The boss laughed, a dry, maniacal laughter. Naomasa went to draw his sidearm before an abrupt gesture from All Might stopped him. Taking a step forward, the now standing Kai took a step back as the much larger man moved towards him. Young man, your quirk is exceptionally powerful, and I'd hate to see you waste your talent pointlessly killing. Please, stand down. All Might began, holding up his hands as a show of good faith. Kai posed, I can't! I'm cursed! I can't control my power! He yelled, tears beginning to run down his cheeks and cut paths through the blood that painted his face. All Might continued walking forward, and with each step forward, Kai took another back. With them? No. You'll never be able to reach your true potential. Neither you nor your friend. All Might said, addressing Hari, who lay on the ground, bound by quirk restrictive cuffs. Please, just stand down and trust us. There are places for special kids like you. You can move past this. All of this. Kai's backpedaling slowed to a stop, and he only stood as he watched as All Might gently took the young boy by his arms and clasped a set of cuffs on his hands. Seconds later, the other officers in the room began taking both Kai and Hari from the room, walking them down the hallway and to the cruisers waiting outside, where the rest of the Shiehasakai were, bound and prepared to be catered off to the likes of Tartarus. What are we gonna do about these kids, All Might? Naomasa would ask the larger man. He paused. You saw it as well as I did, Tsukochi. The man was using the boy for his power. He isn't bad. He was just in a bad circumstance. The symbol of peace said. Naomasa exhaled. I suppose so. We're taking the both of them to the Musutaku General for checkups. What do you want after that? He asked. I'll talk to Principal Nezu at UA about possibly allowing the two of them entrance there. The muscle-bound blonde said, causing Naomasa to choke. UA? Are you crazy? You saw what he did just by touching someone. Do you really think someone with his level of power and control should go anywhere near a crowd of people? The officer asked, bewildered at the decision by the elder hero. Truth be told, I don't know. But I do know that allowing someone with a quirk like his to become a villain, to stay within an organization such as theirs, would have dire consequences. It's best to have him where we can watch him than leave him to his own devices. You really are a bleeding heart, Naomasa said, exhausted in his tone. Kai could only stare at the ground as he and Hari were led into police cruisers stationed at the street's edge. The reverberations of the boss's words echo within the confines of the young man's skull. Use your quirk, Kai! The old man had yelled. Prona. Kai whimpered, looking over at his friend as terrified by the sudden series of events. I don't want to kill anymore. Not like that. Not anymore.
His quirk? Nezu asked, peering up from behind his desk. The rodent had spent the last several hours filing an ever-growing stack of paperwork regarding the school's newest arrival. Sharp craven hues stared back from behind the rounded spectacles that shone on a face as honed as a blade and as cold as ice. A face belonging to none other than Sir Night-Eye. The leading hero being the Shy Hazakai raid that resulted in an unusual house guest. This house guest manifested himself in the form of the young Kai Chisaki, a boy that had been living with and working amongst the Yakuza for what he estimates to be age 6. Pushing his glasses up into place, he peered down at his notes. His quirk is called Overhaul. It allows him to reconstruct and deconstruct matter with a single touch. Night Eye said, furrowing his brow, "Wasn't this the same quirk that was used to kill not only one of the police responses there at the raid, but a Hazakai member too?" The sentient rat questioned, his unflinching gaze meeting Night Eye's icy one. Night Eye sighed. "Unfortunately, yes. However, I think this young boy is redeemable." When All Might burst into the room, he found him and another young boy, Hari Kurono, quirk Chronostasis, in the room with the Shy Hazakai boss. The reports seemed to suggest he was forcing Chisaki to kill against his will. When they entered the room, one of the police touched his hands, and I believe his body reacted on instinct. Night Eye said, setting the papers face down on the tiny desk. "Principal Nezu, if you give Guy a chat." "So be it," Nezu announced, interrupting Night Eye completely. "Chisaki will be placed amongst the young Shota Aizawa and Hazashi Yamada of Class 1A. I think they'll leave him with a good atmosphere to grow, and really prove himself to be a hero," Nezu said, taking up his saucer and glass before offering one to the professional hero. "Tea?" Nezu asked Night Eye. Chisaki fiddled with the hem of one of the stark white rubber surgical gloves he wore on his hands. The chatter of the bell echoed down the hallway, but unlike the usual steady drone that was quick and fanatic, a telltale sign that class was to start soon. Hari Kurono appeared at his side. His chrome-haired best friend gave the unsmiling Chisaki a wide smile of his own, his arrow-like hair hanging down into his forehead like the hands of a clock. "You ready for that test today, Kai? I heard Mr. Stronghold is going to be taking us to the USJ today for rescue training. You can finally show off how much you've been working on that quirk of yours." Harry, known as Kai as Chrono, said excitedly. Kai's own beady golden hues met Chrono's equally colorless ones. "Harry, can you just be a normal kid for once and not be excited for school?" Kai asked flatly, rubbing the sleep out of his golden orbs. "Oh, come on, Kai. Aren't you excited to finally put that training Night Eye has been giving you into play? Really show off?" he asked, gaining only an eye roll from his friend. Kai waved off to the young boy, trudging his way off to class. By then, several months had passed between his initial entrance into UA, giving the young Chisaki ample time to settle in and find his footing. However, the scars remained, mostly in the young boy's obsessively compulsive cleanliness and mesophobic tendencies, evident by the mask he wore over his nose and mouth, and the gloves he wore to cover his hands. This caused the young 16-year-old to catch some eyes. However, most of them left the supposed cursed boy alone, leaving him to his lonesome. "What's up?" The loud, overly obnoxious sound of none other than Hazashi Yamada rang out from his classroom's open door. The obnoxious blonde had been amongst the first few to attempt to befriend Kai, and while Kai's antisocial personality was off-putting at first and made it difficult, the young blonde and his less-than-social friend Shota eventually befriended the young man. Walking into class, almost all eyes befell the young, dark-haired man. Shota gave him a quiet wave, while Hazashi ran up to the young man and grabbed him by the shoulders, giving the young man a prompt but firm shake. "You know what this is, man!" Hazashi yelled, joy practically dripping from his words. Without waiting for a response from Kai, he yelled, "We gotta pick out our hero names today! Awesome!" he shrieked. Kai frowned, seemingly pulling his shoulders into himself at the sudden contact, but otherwise not moving. "Don't be such a buzzkill, man! We're gonna be heroes!" Hazashi said. "I'm not exactly a morning person," Kai responded. The bell overhead signaled the beginning of class. One by one, Kai, Hari, and the others began filtering into their seats, with Chisaki taking a seat beside his childhood friend, with Hazashi and Shota at his opposite side. "Today's day, class," Stronghold began. "The staff at UA hold the rights to deny any names should we find them to be inappropriate or unheroic," he said. earning more than his fair share of odd sideways glances from the class around him, the irony seemingly lost on the man. "I've been thinking, and I think I've got the perfect name," Hizashi announced, grin spread wide. "The voice hero, Present Mike, yeah!" he yelled, shattering the eardrums of all those around him. "What?" Stronghold yelled, finger in his ears to staunch the ringing. Harry exchanged a glance with Kai before looking back at the teacher. "The clockwork hero, Chronostasis," he said, earning several claps from around the room. One by one, the students, male and female alike, listed off their names, leaving only Aizawa and Chisaki as the last two people to speak. However, following some haggling from Hizashi, Shoto finally rolled his eyes before saying, "The erase hero, Eraserhead." All eyes turned to the young Kai, the anticipation almost palpable. "The restoration hero, Genesis," he said. Hours later, Kai and the class found themselves settled amongst several heroes and survivors, all of which were scattered out amongst varying disaster zones, spanning large fires to floods, a stranded boat, a mountain rescue, and a collapsed city. In teams of two, the class split up, aiming to divide and conquer. Harry and Kai split apart from Hizashi and Aizawa, the aforementioned moving towards the more urban disaster zones, lured in by the pain cries of those within the zone. Immediately they were met with destruction. Tons of bricks and rock had fallen atop a woman, ranging anywhere from her 30s to her early 40s. Harry went to work almost immediately, moving to secure the woman. A quick prick to her arm, slowing her movements to almost zero, reducing her chances for injury, while Kai went to back up his friend. "I think she has broken an arm. Some minor lacerations because of the rubble, but she'll be fine," he said, looking up at him. "You mind?" he asked. Kai peeled the glove off his hand, placing his fingers on the large chunk of stone, holding her down. He quickly deconstructed it into dust. Moving his hand down to the ground, he speedily manipulated it to form a flat bed of sorts for the woman, elevating her up and from the rubble allowing Harry to continue tending to her. It would go like this for the next several hours, Harry isolating them and Kai destroying whatever debris sat on them, to allow his friend to mend their broken bones and lacerated skin. At the end, when the bell finally signaled the end of the exercise, Kai had completely lost both of his gloves and stood victoriously with the most amount of points gained out of his entire class. Hizashi said, "Kai, man, that was sick!" Hizashi said to the boy, "With that insane quirk of yours, you're gonna make a wrecking rescue hero!" the loud blonde said. Kai half-heartedly rolled his eyes, but the soft smile on his face was very noticeable by the gathered bunch. Harry gave Kai a smack on the shoulder as the gathered bunch of young heroes began making their way from the facility and filtered out into the buses that would begin to take the students back to the school. As they gathered in, Kai sat somewhere near the back and chose to use the 20 or so minutes it would take to get back to the school to lay his head back against the plushy, leathery surface of the seat and close his eyes to rest. Closing his eyes, the sight, sound, and sense of the bus would fade away as Kai thought back to the times he spent amongst the shy Hazakai. It had been several years since his initial induction into the Hazakai, and he had taken several more until he would be saved from the Yakuza and find himself at UA. Harry had gone with him. And because of that, the young Chisaki felt far less alone than what he could have felt. "Kai," a low voice asked him, jarring him from his sleep. It was Aizawa. The brunette hummed, cocking an eyebrow as he diverted his sleepy gaze to the long-haired boy. "I've seen what your quirk can do. You'd make a phenomenal medic. Why do you take up being a hero instead of a medical profession?" he asked him. Kai frowned, turning his gaze and looked down at his gloved hands. He clenched them tight, so tight that all the blood evaporated from his knuckles and left them cadaverously white. "It's a long story," Kai began. "I don't remember a whole lot from when I was younger. I just know that for as long as I could remember, I was alone. And I had been that way for a while. This old man came across me one day and offered me a home, a bed, hot food. How could I say no? So I went with him. He was a member of the Chihazaka Yakuza. But I didn't care then. I was tired, wet, cold, half-starved. He let me stay there, and I did. I lived there for what seemed like a lifetime. That's where I met Harry. He was the only kid there like me, and we got close pretty fast. When I was 9 is when I started training to use my quirk. That was 2 years before I came here. He said, my quirk lets me break down and reconstruct matter, no matter what that matter is from. He made me practice on living people, again and again, deconstructing and reconstructing them. There was so much blood, and they screamed so much I couldn't begin to think of how much it hurt. All Might found me covered in blood. I used my quirk on one of the officers that was present that day. I couldn't undo what I did, and I just so much as think about touching someone else now makes my skin crawl.
Kai admitted. He absently scratched at the top of his hand and thought.
I don't use my quirk on people anymore. I've decided then that I'd only use it in the surroundings, and if I needed myself to accomplish whatever task I was given. So I decided to pursue being a rescue hero, to make up for all the hurt I caused when I was younger.
He said. Aizawa noticed the eyes vacant and glassy.
I think that the mistakes you were forced into in the past shouldn't keep you from doing as much good as you could in the future. My quirk isn't half as useful as yours, and it limits me in terms of what I can do to help.
Aizawa said, sitting back in his seat. The bus rattled as it pulled out into the highway.
Wake me up when we get to UA.
Kai said, finally letting sleep claim him.
Thank you.
Ear-splitting chatter of the bell resonated down the hallway. A loud and frankly agitated reminder that the third year had, at most, 2.5 months until they would graduate and become fully fledged young heroes. It was something that, despite his otherwise cool, leveled appearance, Kai remained ecstatic for. He lazily diverted his attention from Strongow's lecture to the giggling blonde. Hazashi had been more chipper than usual. Kai put it up to being due to Aizawa's, Nemuri's, Oboros, and his own most recent introduction to his Purple Highness's hero agency. A large stepping stone for the young quartet of up-and-coming heroes. Rising up from his seat, he, alongside the other three, ventured out from the classroom towards where amalgamations of the other classes and years meandered about in the yard connecting the gates to the main doors.
You're ready to head out, Shizuki,
Hazashi said in a sing-song voice. The brunette in question shrugged.
I guess so,
he said flatly.
Come on, man! We're third years now, you know. You gotta show some spunk. This is our first gig as actual heroes, and it's with His Purple Highness,
Hazashi said. Aizawa seemed to share the same sentiment as Kai, however, standing tiredly off towards the back, the curtain of ebony locks that was his hair shadowing his rather glum features. The thunderous blonde looked between the two introverts, a look of shock and exasperation painted across his features before he finally settled his gaze back on Kai.
Fine, you two can be party poopers. Me and Obro will celebrate by ourselves,
Hazashi said, crossing his arms before walking off. Obro, who lingered nearby, couldn't help but grin broadly at the display between the group. It never got old, no matter how old they got.
You two gotta stop messing with Hazashi like that. Poor guy's gotta blow a casket trying to get you two to smile, he said.
Kai stifled a smile, turning away from the group as he began making his way towards the gates.
You can try and act like a tough guy all you want, but I saw that,
Oboro said to Kai. He made a gesture towards Aizawa.
Let's go! Hero duties await,
he announced proudly, marching off through the gates and into the land beyond.
So,
His Purple Highness began.
The 4 of you youngsters are going to be my new interns?
He asked, making sure to put emphasis on the word my.
Yes!
They all answered in sync.
You know what I'm seeing here, standing before me?
His Purple Highness asked, pressing his hands on either of his hips. The 4 of them looked at him questioningly.
What I'm seeing is 4 youngsters who stand here before me that are too afraid to smile. Heroes like us are here to give the gift of hope to folks in trouble. But you lot wear your stress all over your sleeve and drag down the people you need saving. You all want to be heroes? Then trust in your own power and smile until that confidence blooms out from within,
he announced vibrously, throwing both of his hands high in the air.
Now,
What's your hero names? He asked loudly. Oboro and Hazashi grinned in unison, earning the attention of their hero attendee. The voice hero, present Mike! Hazashi yelled. The floating hero, Loud Cloud. Oboro said, throwing an arm around the posterior blonde to his side. The racer hero, Eraserhead. Aizawa said flatly. His Royal Highness frowned. And you, pretty boy? He asked Chizuki. The restoration hero, Genesis. He announced. I like that. It's brave and it's bold. It's boisterous and it's a name that people can cling on to. He said. He placed his hands on each of his shoulders, beaming at them with all the care and adoration of a father. However, he perked up as the pale-skinned woman, scantily clad in what looked to be a trench coat and a few belts, entered the room, pouting upon seeing the four of them. You said you'd wait for me, she said, stomping her boot-clad foot. She immediately flashed a grin and a peace sign. The XXX rated hero, Midnight, she announced with a vibrant twirl of her flog. His Royal Highness grinned. Now this is the kind of spunk that you need to be a hero. Now, His Royal Highness yelled. Let's get to work. His footsteps echoed down the alleyway like the rapid fire of a machine gun, allowing in the wake of a pale-haired boy as one by one clouds manifested underneath his feet, lifting himself higher and higher into the air before he would drop down right on top of the fleeing thief with a double-handed strike from his quarterstaff, the wooden stick's edge stripping directly off the crown of the man's head, knocking the fleeing perp out in one blow. That'll teach you to try to steal, Loud Cloud said, leaning his staff on his shoulder. His Royal Highness Kai and Aizawa followed close behind. The aforementioned pro nodded in approval. Nice job, little hero, His Royal Highness said with approval. Now let's see how well you handle the media. The police should be here soon. Why don't you and old Genesis over there go out there and hand him over to the cops? His Royal Highness said. You got it, RH. Oboro Loudcloud said, flashing the man a thumbs up. Taking the downed robber up, he threw his arm over his shoulder before dragging him, with Kai at his side, down the alleyway and out into the open where 4 police cars waited, weapons drawn and cuffs ready. What are we to call you, hero? The police officer asked Oboro. He took the unconscious man, cuffing him before throwing him into the back of the vehicle alongside the other 2 resting within. They call me Loudcloud, he said. The officer looked from him and to Kai. And you? He asked. Genesis. He replied, bowing his head. The officer returned to gesture back, closing the door and sealing the last 2 away before preparing to get back into his vehicle. An explosion from further down the road garnered both Oboro and Kai's attention. What the? The building in front of them was reduced to rubble as a rotund, frog-like figure emerged from the rubble. Oboro! I need you to get Aizawa as fast as you can to help in the evacuations! He yelled. Kai and I will hold this thing back! He yelled. Oboro looked over at Kai, who returned a similarly uneasy gaze. Oboro rapidly formed clouds underneath him before using it to quickly fly up and away from the scene. Kai looked back towards the villain, watching as a tumor-like growth formed on his back before floating up and off. Kai, watch out! Highness said. He pushed Kai out of the way as the bubbled lands, exploding as soon as they touched down and leaving the craters in the ground upon impact that rocketed the road, making even the sturdiest of buildings quake. Kai crawled to his hands and knees, quickly using his teeth to pry the glove from his hand before placing his palm down on the tarmac beneath. The rock reacted to his touch, a massive square pillar formed beneath the villain and shooting him up into the air as an energy blast struck the creature in the side. Buster Yonan has arrived, His Royal Highness said. 4 figures appeared from down the road. One summoned what looked to be a jellyfish, which immediately moved to attack the villain, while the other's skin hardened and turned to jagged and prickly like a porcupine. The villain almost immediately opened his mouth to consume one of the approaching jellyfish, and as another villain arrived and began shooting beams of green energy at the villain, he did the same thing, opening his mouth to angrily consume the ensuing attacks by the heroes. In return, several bubbles began forming on the beast's back. These bubbles were directed down towards the villains, and as they touched down, they exploded with the stored and combined energy of the heroes' attacks. He's eating our attacks and using them to strengthen his own, Highness said in astonishment. We need to stop him now so he doesn't tear apart the whole city. Kai furrowed his brow, clenching his hand where it sat and causing the pillar to vaporize before quickly reforming into several pillars which looped up before crushing down on the villain. He responded as prior, merely opening his mouth to consume the ensuing attacks. With nothing left to stop it, the villain would hunker down before looping off the pillar and flying off into the city. Kai! Highness said. Run! You need to stop that thing no matter what! Highness ushered him on. Kai went sprinting as fast as he could down the street. Several rapid explosions could be heard in the distance that spurred Kai forward faster. He plucked the opposite glove from his hand as he ran, quickly eating up the distance towards the villain. He was greeted to the sight of a crumbling school, an unconscious midnight, and Overhaul laying amongst the rubble, bleeding from a large wound on his skull. Aizawa looked up from where he lay, bloodied and bruised, at Kai as he approached. Shoto! Kai yelled, sprinting forward and coming to his friend's side. What happened is... Overhaul is dead. Highness is unconscious, and my legs are broken. Shoto interrupted him. You need to fight this thing, he said. I can't. My quirk. Aizawa grasped Kai by the arm. You need to, or else Overhaul died for nothing. Aizawa ushered him. Kai nodded, stepping back before looking towards the villain. Kneeling down, he placed one of his hands on top of Overhaul's face, before clenching his face with the other. His eyes crackled and broke like glass, until before Aizawa's eyes their flesh, limbs, blood, and muscles merged. A pair of arms, reminiscent of Overhaul's own, sprouted from below his own. His skin turned pale with black veins running from it, and it appeared that Overhaul's very clothes had merged with Kai's flesh. He launched himself through the air directly at the villain. With a chunk of rock in hand, as the villain swung at him, the rock would quickly manifest into spikes that he'd use to block the strike, before responding with a double-fisted right hook that landed with all the force of a bus, rocking the villain and knocking him to the side before he would place all four hands on the ground. Multiple pillars of stone would merge from the ground, rapidly striking the villain and battering him into the ground again and again. The pillar would soon melt away into a large pillar that would throw the villain up seconds before another would intercept the villain and sending him careening back into the ground. I'm sorry, Overhaul, but I need your hands to help me in beating this villain, Chisaki yelled, manifesting clouds underneath his feet similar to what Overhaul had done. He used them to launch himself at the villain. His four arms disintegrated before forming two massive fists that he would use to close the beast's mouth with an uppercut as he opened his maw. Putting both massive hands to the ground, the earth around the beast would come to life, encasing it before merging it in with the ground and freezing it solid where it laid, leaving Kai standing there, breathless. Kai looked down at himself, placing a hand against his chest. His body separated from Overhaul's own, causing him to collapse to his hands and knees. Dragging himself towards Overhaul, he placed his hand on top of his head, using his quirk to break down and rebuild Overhaul's own broken body. The exhaustion caused Kai to collapse onto his back with a heavy breath. His vision faded as the sirens arrived, and Kai faded blissfully into unconsciousness, a smile on his lips. They were heroes, finally. Thank you all for indulging yourselves in the story thus far. I hope you enjoyed it. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. Firstly, we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes deep into the facts and lore of a wide variety of anime. It's sure to expand your weeb knowledge for all kinds of series, guaranteed. On top of that, we have a third channel called We the Celestial Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel already, but in the vast world and lore of Naruto. Go check it out if you're in the mood for some jutsu action. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. Lastly, if you're interested in what we do here at We the Celestials, then I would like to extend out an invitation to join the team. The only caveat being, we only accept members 16 years and up to join our crew. You can sign up for whichever category fulfills your interests by joining the recruitment Discord using the link in the description below. Our Discord is an all-around fantastic place to be. Whether you're a fan or looking to join our band of misfits, We're always looking for members to join us. Well, that's it from us for today's video, so thank you all for watching, and have a great day.